Daniel Dubov is a Russian grandmaster in which he plays unpredictable and often sacrifices his pieces. His style is almost similar to GM Tal. Here are some sacrifices of this man Dubov. It's Dubov vs Vidit. This is where the commotion starts. Vidit captures the pawn threatening the knight, but Dubov didn't move his knight and just played knight to d2. A brilliant move ignoring the threat. Black captures and the queen captured back. Both the knight and bishop were under attack, and Vidit moved back his bishop. Dubov captures the knight with the fork. Of course, the bishop blocks and the queen comes back. Vidit captures the pawn, and both of them developed. And here, Vidit made an inaccuracy. This allowed Dubov to exchange and capture a pawn. Rook move, and then Dubov captured the pawn. Bishop to e6, and Dubov moves his rook. Vidit captured the free pawn, and Dubov exchanged his knight for a bishop. The rook pinned the bishop, and then pawn moved to support the bishop. The queen slides. Vidit moves the pawn to h6. The queen slipped, and then Vidit tried to exchange the queens, but Dubov ends it with a rook takes bishop. Next is against Oparin. The pawn attacked the knight, and Oparin disregarded that and just captured the pawn, hitting the rook. But Dubov didn't care about the threat and just took the knight. Pawn captured back, and the knight is under attack, so it jumped back. After this pawn push, Dubov played a brilliant move. Queen to f4, the queen defended the pawn, but Dubov hit him with another brilliance. Rook takes g6, sacrificing his rook. The king captured it, and the rook gave a check. As the king moves back, the rook goes in, and after this king moves, Dubov ends it with a knight to h4. Next is against Grandmaster Grisha. After this queen takes, Dubov sacrificed his knight. The king captured it. Then Dubov moves his rook to a5, hitting the queen. Grishuk has no choice but to exchange his queen. Dubov captures, and after this pawn takes, Dubov played a brilliant sacrifice. Rook takes the bishop. Grishuk responded with a king move, and Dubov moved away his rook. The rook avoided the threat, and the b3 pawn got captured. Knight developed, and then bishop to h3. Grishuk offered a rook trade which Dubov accepted. The rook moved to e5, but Grishuk tried to counterplay. After a few more moves, Grishuk got a passed pawn. The bishop threatened it, and it slid back to e8. Knight develops, and the bishop forked the pawn and knight, and after this, rook defended. Dubov ends it with a rook check. The next game is versus Giri. In this game, Giri is at an advantage. The queen gives a check, and the king moves back. Then Dubov hit him with a brilliant rook sacrifice. Bishop takes and queen takes. The queen gives a check. The king moves to safety, and Giri wants a queen exchange. Dubov avoids and gives a check. King to f2 played, then rook to f4, scaring away the queen, and Dubov gave another check. The king moves up to e3, and Dubov played f8. The white king was being chased, and eventually, it got cornered. Dubov sacrificed his bishop, and Giri needed to sacrifice his queen, and Dubov ended it with the queen to e6. Dubov versus Giga. After Dubov moves his knight, Giga played g5 instead of escaping. Dubov makes a brilliant sacrifice. Bishop takes pawn, and bishop captures back. Queen slides up, threatening the bishop, so it moves back. After this, rook to d1. Giga played f5. Dubov responded with e6, threatening the knight. Giga captured the knight. Queen to g4 with a check. King to h8 to dodge, then captured the knight. Rook moves to f7, and the e4 pawn got captured. Bishop in c4, and Dubov attacks the rook. Rook takes the pawn, then a rook exchange, and then bishop to d1. The queen avoids it by playing e7, but Dubov, he ends it with a brilliant move. Rook to d8, and Giga resigned. Dubov versus Tuan is up next. Tuan's queen is under attack, so it moves back to b6. And Dubov played bishop defends. But Dubov still captured the knight. And after taking the bishop, Dubov played a brilliant sacrifice, which is knight to f6 with a check. Tuan was tempted, so he took it. But here comes rook to e4. Bishop to d3 then, rook gave a check. Off course, bishop blocks. But h6 pawn got capture. Tuan tried to counterplay with queen to b2, threatening the rook. But Dubov didn't care and moved a brilliant rook to h4. Queen takes rook with a check. King dodge, and another bishop check. But the rook was there. Queen to d1 was played, and the room moved back to h4, and queen gave one last check. And after a simple f3 pawn block, Tuan resigned. Dubov faced up Makarian. Dubov moves his queen to h5. Then Makarian moves his rook to g8. Knight to h6, threatening a fork, but the queen defended, even though the pawn was still captured, and the king moved to g7. The knight moves back, and the other rook slides to develop. Knight takes the rook, then the queen captured back. Dubov then played a brilliant sacrifice, which is knight takes the pawn on f6, forking the rook and the queen. Makarian countered with a rook takes rook, and the rook was taken. King takes the knight, and the queen gave a check. After few moves, queen moves back again to f3 with a check, and after king to g7, Dubov captured the knight in b7 and Makarian resigned. He played against Nihal Sarin. Dubov moves his knight to g5. And here, Sarin made a big blunder, which is the knight to d5. Dubov sees it, and he played a sacrifice that made Sarin resign. He played queen to h5, and that's how it ended. Zufari versus Dubov. Here Zufari moved his pawn to g5, but instead of moving it away, Dubov casually played a brilliant g6. Zufari first captured the pawn while attacking the rook. Bishop takes the rook, and bishop takes back with the check. After the king move, Dubov then captured the rook. Bishop captured it back. Few moves later, Dubov is on an attack mode, and after rook takes f3, the queen went back to g2. Queen went to e4, and then knight jumped to c3, attacking the queen. The queen went back to f5. The bishop once again attacks the queen, but the queen just went to f4. Zufari moves his knight to d5, forking the bishop and the queen. But Dubov played a brilliant move. He plays rook to d3, saving none of them. Didn't save the queen. The rook dodged the threat and moved to the queen. But instead of dodging, Dubov played a wild move, which is rook takes knight. Of course, Zufari captured the queen. Knight takes back the rook. Few more moves, and Dubov moves his rook for a check. The bishop blocks, then the knight went back to d5. It's equal, but Zufari played a blunder with e3. This allows you a fork in e3 by the knight. The queen checks one final time, and after the king moves to g7. Zufari resigned. The next game is against Praggnanandha. After rook to g5, Prag played f4. Dubov slipped by playing g3. Then after that, Praggnanandha made a blunder, which is knight to f3. Dubov played a brilliant sacrifice with rook takes knight in f3. The pawn captures back. The queen with the capture in h3 with the check. King to g1. And again, Dubov played an insanely brilliant idea. It is bishop to d4 check. The queen was forced to capture. Then Dubov played queen to g3 with a check. Prag played h1. But after Dubov played rook to c2, Prag resigned. Next is against Sharich. Dubov played queen to g3. Sharich responded with the rook to d8. Pawn to f4, stopping the passed pawn. And after that, Sharich played a bad move, which is king to f8. Then, seeing that, Dubov played a brilliant sacrifice, which is rook takes the bishop. Queen capture was forced. Pawn takes the queen in g3. Then pawn captures the rook in e6. Then here comes the passed pawn c7. Sharich moved his queen to e7. The pawn captures the rook with promotion that forced Sharich to capture it. Dubov played his other pawn a decoy, and then Sharich surrendered. Last but not the least is against Kollars. After Dubov captured the pawn in g4, Kollars played knight to b6. But instead of moving away his bishop, he just give it away by playing. Bishop takes pawn in f7, which is brilliancy. Bishop takes the rook, and also threatening this knight in a pin. But Dubov played queen to g6 check. king went to f8 by force, and Dubov again played a stunning brilliant, which is rook to g1. Collars played e7. Dubov played bishop to b3. f5, knight jumped to g5. And Collars played rook to e8. Dubov make a knight jump to e6 with a check. Queen takes was forced, and bishop takes queen. King to e7, then knight with the check. Knight captures the knight. Queen to f7 played by Dubov. King to d8 and queen to d7 checkmate. What is your favorite among those games?